To be human. To be fearfully and wonderfully made. The neurons in our brains number as many as the stars in the Milky Way. Inside each of us is an inner world deeper than any ocean, the universe of breathtaking scale, complexity, and potential. As we grow, our experience of the world around us, our memories, thoughts, and feelings form us into unique individuals with profound potential to dream, inspire, lead, love, and become. But what happens to this inner world when our experiences of war, rape, torture, loss, grief, trauma, and shame? What happens when our memories are seared with unbearable images? When our negative emotions paralyze us? When our thoughts become a prison?
You never forget.
Wakati ona mtu iko na bunduki na iko na mpanga, nilisikia douleur juu ya mtoto.
Akitoka huyu naye anakuja kamata hii shingo.
مجبورة متنبيلي مchuna hadi Suri.
Sasa najiuliza nilimkosea nini, sijui kana wakosea.
ممكن بين هذا مريبا ما الدنيا ناخش يلا كنا ناخش.
For millions of men, women, and children around the world, the trauma of war and the experience of life as a refugee is overwhelming. Many choose to end their own lives. To have any hope of living the lives we were created to live, we all need someone to show compassion, to walk with us, to help us, and to show us we're not alone. That's why Tutapona exists. Motivated by God's love for all, we lead individuals affected by armed conflict to emotional recovery. In Uganda and Iraq, we provide mental health services to both adults and children who are living as refugees and internally displaced people after fleeing brutal wars in the Congo, South Sudan, and Syria. Our staff are nationals, many of whom have lived through these same conflicts. Our group programming helps people build resilience within themselves through the powerful principles of hope, gratitude, kindness, courage, and forgiveness. And they work. Throughout our existence, more than 50,000 people have participated in our programs and embarked on a journey towards healing.
Ile nayo inanisaidia. Hapa watu wananichukia lakini ninaona Tutapona inanipenda.
Gwara kuguruka sasa kurara kunja inaona gasenga jako mfite kwizera yuko kuzaci.
Kargo fadea bas moya doni kon
maaji
deharmini.
Nothing is better than having a hope in life. That's why Tutapona is important to our lives.
In every session, we see people making a commitment to growth and personal development. We see a 50% reduction in trauma symptoms in our participants and a significant jump in their well-being. We see families restored and homes rebuilt. We see leaders emerge. We see healing. We see hope. And we invite you to join us.
We will be healed.
We will be healed.
We will be healed.
Tutapona. Together, we will be healed.
So welcome again. My name is Jamie Weingartner. I'm the Director of Resource Development here at Tutapona. I'm just really excited to have you guys here with us tonight and just taking time out of your evening. I know you all have stuff that you're probably doing, families and dinner and getting ready for the next day and so on and so forth. So thank you for being here with us. We've got some friends from the States here, but also several from Canada. So thank you guys for hopping on and joining us tonight. Just a quick reminder, if you could keep yourself muted, that would be great, just so it doesn't run any interference as we're on the call together. And then if you have questions, please use the chat feature. At the end of the call, we are going to have a time for question and answers. So would love to see some interaction in the chat. If you guys know how to use the chat button, it should be at the bottom of your screen called chat. So we've got several staff members here with us tonight as well that will be assisting with the chat. As you have questions, we'll be collecting those, or if you just want to give a shout out, you can use that chat feature. All right, well, I want to introduce you guys to the founders of Tutapona, Carl and Julie Gaede. They're going to jump on here in a second. They started Tutapona, the organization, in 2008. So this is our 15th year of celebration this year. So we're super excited about that and the 60,000 participants that have been able to partake in our programming. So Carl and Julie, mental health professionals, they knew that God was calling them to something different than the lives that they were living. And I'm sure they'll share a little bit about that. They knew, though, that in order to heal, emotional healing is part of that healing. And that's where our organization's name came from. Tutapona means we will be healed in the Swahili language. So we really embrace that as who we are. We together will be healed. Again, that was in the Swahili language. So I'm going to now pass it over to Carl and Julie, and they're going to share a little bit more with us.
All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are extremely glad that you are here. Yeah, as Jamie mentioned, my name is Carl Gaede, and this is my amazing wife, Julie. And we have had the profound privilege of being part of Tutapona from the very beginning. And, you know, I'm really glad you're here because I love sharing about Tutapona. I love sharing and introducing people to what God is doing through Tutapona. And I just, you know, before I even start about sharing about who Tutapona is and how we got started, I just want to make it very clear that Julie and I, our intention is always to give God the glory for what has taken place and for what he is doing. This is all about what God is doing. It's not about Julie or me. It's not even about Tutapona. It's about what God is doing through Tutapona. And so that's why I love sharing about it. That's why I love introducing people to who Tutapona is. But like Jamie said, we have had the incredible privilege of being part of it from the very beginning. Julie and I were living here in Wisconsin, the same town where we are right now. And, you know, God had given us a good life. We had a good life. We had a nice house and we had nice cars and a great church family that we were part of. And all of a sudden, kind of as a surprise to us, God revealed his desire for us to be part of Tutapona. Tutapona didn't start because Julie and I were looking for an adventure or because Julie and I were tired of our lives or we were going through a midlife crisis. Personally, I feel like I'm always in a midlife crisis. I'm always in some stage of my life crisis, you know, thinking like, what's next? What's next? And what else, God? What more do you want? But it wasn't, we were not reacting to anything like that, Julie and I. We weren't tired of our lives or thinking, man, we need a change, or even that, you know, we want to go and do some good in the world. We want to go and make a difference. It wasn't even that. It really was that God revealed to us something that was happening in northern Uganda that had been happening for 20 years in northern Uganda, and we didn't know anything about it. And this situation in northern Uganda was different than anything else we had ever heard of before. It and it touched us. And it touched us in a way that was different than every other horrific story and every other horrific event that takes place daily around the planet. And our hearts broke for what was happening in northern Uganda at the time. And when we learned about it, it felt like something changed in us. It felt like something shifted. And now that we were aware of what was happening, that we had a responsibility to do something about it. But who are we? We're just this couple in Wisconsin. We had 2 young daughters. We were psychotherapists, but that didn't feel like it gave us the skills to actually address the level of trauma that people were experiencing in northern Uganda, where the rebels were known for mutilating people, cutting off their lips and cutting off their ears and cutting off their nose as a sign of terror, where the rebels were known for abducting young children as young as 7 or 8 years old and forcing them to fight in the military as child soldiers, forcing the girls to marry commanders and serve as sex slaves. What we had been trained in, our education and our experience and the jobs that we had as psychotherapists, didn't feel like it had prepared us for that. So what were we supposed to do? How were we supposed to help? But yet we were changed as people, and our hearts remained broken for what was happening. And so we ended up making a trip there and seeing for ourselves what was happening. In northern Uganda, over 90% of the population was displaced because of ISIS, or because of the LRA, the Lord's Resistance Army, that was roaming at that time, or 2.1 million people displaced in the northern half of the country. So we went out to the IDP camps, internally displaced people camps, to see for ourselves what it was like. And there were a lot of organizations that were doing great work, but nobody was really addressing the emotional effects of the conflict and the violence that people had experienced. And so that's how Tutapona was born. Tutapona was really born out of our broken hearts. And to this day, we desire nothing more than for our hearts to continue to break for what breaks God's heart, for us to continue to be moved and moved to action for those things that break God's heart. Our desire was simply to love and to care for people. And yes, we wanted to see people come to know Jesus. We want the kingdom of God to be expanded for sure, but we knew the way to do that was not to go over there and start waving our Bibles around and start preaching at people, but by bringing emotional healing, by bringing God's love to people, by meeting a tangible and practical need, they could experience God's love in ways that they had never had before. So we were able to bring the gospel to people through trauma rehabilitation. And we were able to go through doors that would not have been open to us had we just been a typical missionary. But by being professional mental health practitioners, bringing a program of trauma rehabilitation, we were able to bring the gospel to people. And so let me just tell you a little bit about what our programs typically look like. A lot of our work centers around group programming. So by working in groups, we do individual counseling as it's needed. And for those people that need more intensive services, but by doing group counseling, we're able to reach a larger number of people in the same amount of time. Also, the group process itself lends itself to a lot of benefits in helping restore community, in building relationships, building trust. And so we do most of our work in a group program. We have an adult program called Grow, We have a children's program called The Hero's Journey. And then we also have a dual program that works on mental health and addictions. It's called Healthy Habits. And we've launched that in Uganda, and we're looking to launch that in Iraq soon as well. So we started in Uganda, and after living there for 8 years and setting up our teams, we felt that God was calling us to northern Iraq to work with the effects of ISIS. The work in Iraq obviously is different than Uganda, but in both places, people are extremely affected by the violence of a radical terrorist group. So we had our programs contextualized for working in that northern Iraq context with the Kurdish people. We had the program translated, and we hired staff, trained them, equipped them, and then began rolling out our programs. Our group programs are based on, in large part, on post-traumatic growth theory. So what that means is that we're looking to help people grow through their traumatic experiences. We're looking to help this terrible, painful experience that they've gone through actually become a catalyst for growth in their life. The literature around post-traumatic growth shows that when people experience a terrible event, an event that really rocks them, oftentimes people are knocked backwards on their journey. As they're moving through life, something happens and it knocks us backwards. Well, the research would show that there is a group of people that when that happens and they get knocked backwards, that they actually remain there. They get stuck there and they never really move beyond that. That terrible event that happened defines them. But the research shows that there's a second group of people. And when that happens, when a terrible event happens and they get knocked backwards, they work their way, sometimes over years, sometimes scratching and clawing their way, but they can work their way back to where they were before that terrible thing happened. And that's what a lot of therapy tries to do, is help get people back to the place where they were before, help them overcome the symptoms of their trauma, not have nightmares, not have relation problems, and get back to the point where they were before the trauma occurred. But the research would show that there's a third group of people that when they get knocked backwards, their life actually takes on a new trajectory, and they can actually move beyond where they ever would have been had the trauma not occurred in their life. And that trauma becomes a catalyst for growth. They grow not in spite of the trauma, but actually because of the trauma. The trauma creates a shift that allows them to move beyond where they ever would have been had the trauma not occurred. And that was super exciting to us when we learned that, when we discovered that in the research. So then the question became, okay, is that true for everybody? Or is that just for a select group of people? Who is that third group of people? Who are they? Were they just born lucky? Were they just born with certain characteristics and traits that allowed them to grow? But the research would actually show that that growth is available to anyone. That group possesses certain characteristics. And so our challenge was, okay, if those characteristics are present in people who grow through traumatic experiences, can we teach those characteristics and help develop those in our participants, knowing that the research shows that they will grow through that trauma? Now, it's no surprise, probably to you, it's certainly not a surprise to me, that those characteristics that people possess are actually discussed in the Bible. They're actually biblical principles. So the secular research in this area of post-traumatic growth shows that there's 5 key characteristics that those people possess. The first one, the secular literature refers to as religiousness. That they call it just religiousness. But when we dove down deeper into what that actually means, it actually means that people who believe in God. Now, but then when we dug down even further, it doesn't even just mean people that believe in God. It actually means, when they refer to religiousness, it means people that believe that there's a God who cares about me. So that's the first characteristic of people who grow through their trauma, is belief in a God who cares about me. The second characteristic that people possess who grow is kindness. Those people that are able to look beyond themselves and extend kindness to other people. And we see this all the time in the refugee camps where we work. Those people that just stay to themselves, just are concerned about themselves only, they typically become angry and frustrated and bitter. But those people that actually look outside of themselves and think, you know, I might be struggling and I might be having a hard time, but you know what? This little old lady in the tent next to me, she can't even get up and get into the line to get food. Maybe I can go and get food for her and bring it back to her. Maybe I can serve her in some way. So kindness is the second one. The third one is gratitude. People that see things that they have to be grateful for and focus on those things tend to grow. Those people that say, I lost everything, I lost everybody that I love, but I'm so glad that my brother made it and I have my brother with me. Or I'm so glad my wife made it and we got out safe. Even though we lost everything, at least we have each other. The fourth characteristic is hope. Those people that have hope for the future. And then the fifth characteristic is courage. And that can be defined in a lot of different ways. Oftentimes in our programs, we define that as having the courage to forgive. And so we bring forgiveness into the program a lot. So that's just a very brief little description of our group programming. As I mentioned earlier, we also have individual counseling. We have counselors on staff that for those individuals that need more than they could get in a group program, that they have that individual attention as well to help them process through some of that. But really what we're interested in is holistic healing. Healing isn't just physical or mental, but looking at spiritual healing as well. And often when these really terrible events happen, people question God. Where was God in the midst of all of this? And it allows us to have great opportunities to let them experience the love of God in the deepest, darkest moments of their life. And as you can imagine, with 60,000 people that have gone through our programs, there's a million different testimonials, probably not a million with only 60,000 people that have gone through, but there's been a lot of great testimonials, a lot of life transformation that has taken place. There's just been some incredibly beautiful stories. And so I'll let Julie maybe share one or two stories that stand out for her. And again, I want to encourage you guys, if you have any questions at all, put them in the chat. I would love to interact with some questions. That's my favorite time, much more than just monologuing. I love responding and talking and dialoguing with you. So please share any questions. But let me allow Julie to share maybe a story or two.
Yeah, when Carl mentioned this to me, I tell you, just the privilege of being able to do this work and hearing the way that God moves in healing for people is such a blessing to me. And so a a lot of people ask, like, how can you do this? How can you listen to these hard stories? But this is, in large part how it's possible, because just being able to watch the ways that people go from being suicidal to having hope and watching lives transform is just the biggest privilege ever. So, but yeah, when you asked me to think of a story, one of the ones that came to me was, in our early days when we were working with some folks from Rwanda genocide, and there was a gentleman by the name of Manny who when the issues between the Hutus and the Tutsis was going on, he had a neighbor that was circulating amongst the community that he was a Tutsi, and he was getting very harassed for that. And then one day this neighbor came and he brought him a hoe, and he said, "This is the day that you're going to die, and here's the hoe, and you need to dig your own grave." And so while he was and he stood there with just his weapon, and while Manny was digging his own grave and being faced with, I'm making this place where I'm going to be laying forever. And so he's digging his grave, and then all of a sudden the government came and just started firing everywhere. And so this was Manny's escape. And so he ran and eventually found his way into one of the refugee settlements that we were working in, and he came to our program just with a lot of anger and bitterness, of course, and especially because his neighbor was living in the same refugee settlement, and so he was needing to see this man, and though they never talked about really what had happened, he just was plotting revenge and considering how he could kill this man. And so then he came into our program, and I just want to share his words because they just really touched me. He said, then Tutapona came. Just when I thought my heart was so hard and there was no other option except revenge, Tutapona helped me overcome my pain and taught me about forgiveness. I have not told this man that I forgive him, but in my heart I have. I no longer want to kill him. I no longer want him to suffer. I am free. I wish Tutapona had come earlier so that I would have not lived with hatred and revenge for so long, but I praise God that I'm now free. So I just wanted to share that today.
And so I think now we want to introduce you to two of our staff, Nariman and Dave, who will give a little bit of telling who is Tutapona and why is this work important.
Hello, it's Nariman, Program Manager from Tutapona, Kurdistan. Thank you for supporting us. I think Tutapona's work is important because refugees and IDPs, they deserve a normal life like us. And we want to support them to grow through their tragic circumstances and use their skills to help themselves and others in their community. Thank you for supporting.
Hello, my name is David Wilkes. I am the country director for Tutapona in Uganda, and I've been asked to share about why our work is important. Our work is important because the needs are great. Around the world, conflict is happening, wars, violence, and there's a great need for healing, but the amount of healing needed and the available services are few. But the good news is that we can be a part of that healing. Tutapona has amazing staff that are compassionate and equipped and professional to walk alongside people that have experienced war and conflict. And we have unique programs and interventions that work with groups and individuals and help them to not only get back to their lives, but actually to grow through these experiences. And when you get to hear these stories, meet people face to face, and see the numbers of people that are healed, it's just quite astounding. So that's why we're needed, because we get to bring about that healing. And please come alongside with us. Together we will be healed.
Ilienea saa 10 ya usiku wakatuingilia ndani. Wameua baba na mama na wadada yangu wawili na kaka yangu wawili. Watu 6 walikuwa wameuawa ndani ya jamaa yangu. Sasa wakati waliingia na mimi nikaona nimefariki. Sasa pale wamoja walikuwa wako wananichoma visu na wengine wako wanabaka mke wangu. Lakini kitu mwana nakumbuka watoto wako walalamika, papa anakufa, papa anakufa. Inanisumbua sana. Ile imenisaidia, na kuna ingine nilikuwa nafanya kama niko natembea njiani ninazungumza peke yangu. Wananichukia kabisa sana, na wengine wananisema niko mtu mbaya. Sasa najiuliza nilimkosea nini, sijui kana wakosea. Sababu tangu niko hapa watu hawakuje kunitembelea. Na wakati wanakuja niko mina fanya chakula, wakati mama alikuwa 40 na mtoto mgonjwa, nilikuwa na jenye na nisaidia kututapona, nile kunisogelea, kunizungumzia. Najisikia kweli niko vizuri kwa tutapona. Kia kweli niko protege kabisa. Ile nayo inanisaidia. Hapa watu wananichukia, lakini ninaona tutapona inanipenda.
Hey everyone, my name is Brandon Hackett. I'm the Director of Finance Administration here at Tutapona. And I just have a few questions. I haven't seen any questions in the chat so far, but if you guys have some, feel free to toss them in there. Just have a little time here with Carl and Judy to answer some questions. We just heard from Nariman and Dave. Carl, could you talk about what our staffing looks like in country? The folks who run these programs in country?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 50 staff around the world right now, and the local staff in the countries where we work, they're all local indigenous staff. In Uganda, Dave, who you saw, is the only of 40 staff that we have in Uganda. Dave is the only non-Ugandan. So everyone else is a Ugandan staff member. So we train up and equip local indigenous staff to run our programs in their own language, in their own culture, among their own people. And we found that it's much more effective doing it that way than having Americans come or Canadians from the West and bring in expertise into that culture. But really, Julie and I have found that the best thing that we can do is to train up and equip local staff so we can take the education, the experience, and the skills that God has given us and transfer that to people in the local context. So most of our staff are from the countries where we're serving.
Thanks, Carl. We heard a little bit from Julie there right before the video about, a story that impacted her. What's the most impactful moment you've experienced in the 15 years at Tutapona?
Oh, man. So this is probably not the answer that you're looking for, Brandon, or that people want to hear. But, one of probably the most impactful moment for me was when we got on a plane and moved to Uganda. When we first got started and when we had made the decision, God, we are all in. God, we're going. And We didn't know what laid ahead. There was a lot of unknowns, and we didn't know if we would be successful or if we would fail. We didn't know anything. We didn't even know how we would do it once we got on the ground in Uganda, but we went. And that was the defining moment for us. And that's what stands out for me, is that we could have stayed back in America and thought, oh, that's terrible, somebody should do something. But when we were on the verge there, and we didn't know if it would fail or succeed, but we went. That was really a defining moment for me, and that's what stands out the most.
Can I share too?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think one of the most defining moments for me was when, after, doing this program, and our programs, I'm so proud of our programs. I just think that they're just really well written, and I love the content. I love that it's gospel focused. But when these two Italy people from Wisconsin come and we're working with all this trauma, and we're seeing people that are going through our program have such significant changes, and being able to forgive, like, people who have burned down their family in a hut, or and being able to, like, move in forgiveness in these ways, and just hear the transformational stories of people, and just realizing that, like, yeah, our program's great, but, like, this is not about our program. This is about God coming down in the midst of this work and transforming lives. That I just, we were trained up in psychotherapy, and we see how that moves people, but this is different. This is special, and it's nothing that we can take credit for, nothing that I feel like we could give our program credit for. It was just watching that this is God's deal, and we're just offering this place for him to come and move in people's lives, and he gets all the credit for that. So anyway.
Yeah. And Brandon, I saw that you responded in the chat, but somebody did ask a question about our staff funded through Tutapona. And yes, they are. Our staff are our greatest asset. Our staff is really all we have.
Yeah.
We have to have other things. We have to have offices, and we have to have vehicles to transport the staff out. But really, about 80% or more, Brandon would know more than me because he's our director of finance and he's in charge of all of that stuff. He's great at it. But from my understanding, it's over 80% of our expenditure goes to pay our staff and to so they can do the work. They're really our greatest asset. That's all we have as Tutapona.
And they're incredible.
And they are incredible. God has really blessed us.
There's another question in the chat about funding. Does Tutapona benefit from government grant support, or is fundraising solely through donors giving to Tutapona?
Yeah, we do get some institutional donors through large grants, but we haven't received any direct funding from the U.S. government through USAID. We have been partners under other programs, but a lot of our funding does come from individual donors and churches, and that's what we really want, is because we want to join hands with people like you to partner together in this work. So we really want a large percentage of our funding to come through our partners, individuals and churches. At the moment, we do get some funding from institutional donors, and that's probably going to be a part of the equation moving forward. But it's tricky finding foundations and finding grants that match well with us, because honestly, we're not just going to go chasing after every grant that comes up. We have to be very careful that we apply for grants that match who we are, and they're not asking us to change what we do, because that's just something we're not interested in.
We got time for one more, Jamie? Okay. How do you find the places to minister? I'm sure there are dozens of refugee camps in Uganda, Iraq, etc.
Oh man, that's a great question. First of all, just why we're even in Iraq and why we're even in Uganda. We didn't set out to do this, and we're not chasing this at all, but it just turns out that God takes us to places that are kind of really bad. At that time, when we moved to Uganda, the UN was calling that the world's worst unattended humanitarian crisis. And then in 2016, when we moved to Iraq, the UN was calling the crisis in Syria the world's worst humanitarian crisis. And so it seems like God just continues to take us to those places where there is great need. And that's really our desire, is just to be used by God in the places where there is a great need. And so really, if you're going to do trauma counseling, you need to go to where the trauma is. And so as we've made ourselves open to that, God keeps opening doors for us to go into those places. That's why we're now opening up in Ukraine and going there. But then specifically within the countries in Uganda, yeah, there's a lot of different needs. We really look at where are the gaps. There are some other organizations that are doing some mental health work. There's really, we don't know of any others that are doing it from a Christ-centered perspective, but there are some. And so we try to go to areas where there's a gap, where people are not already providing that service. The same in Iraq as well. Now, funding is a problem, and so we can't go everywhere and into every camp that exists there. So we have to be really strategic and figure out where is the greatest need, and then how can we bring our work there.
Thanks, Brandon and Carl and Julie. If you guys have more questions, Brandon, Chandra, and Mary will answer those in the chat, but for the sake of time, we'll wrap it up. And then Chandra also threw in the chat my email address, so you can email those questions as well. We're always welcoming questions, so feel free, if we ran out of time tonight, to email those over and ask those questions. I just want to say thank you guys all for attending again. I want to share one more thing really fast with you before we jump off the call. So this summer, we are participating in the Race Across America. If you don't know what that is a 3,000-mile bicycle ride. So not motorcycle, but a bicycle across the U.S. We, as in not me, I shouldn't have said we because I'm not riding my bicycle, but we do have 2 participants on the call. Carl, our founder, is one of those. And Steve Weldon is on the call with us as well, both riders in that. So we have an 8-person team who is doing this ride. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about it, but it's actually 30% longer than the Tour de France. So that was kind of interesting to me if you've ever followed cyclists at all. And they're going to accomplish it, hopefully, fingers crossed, in less than a week's time. So the reason that we're doing this ride across America, the Race Across America, is to promote the work that we're doing and, use the platform to share with others about Tutapona. I don't think they're just doing it to get out there and just have a good old time riding 3,000 miles. It's really because we want others to know about what God is letting us be part of here at Tutapona. So that's super exciting. If you want to know more about RAM, our Race Across America, there is a website that you can go to learn more about that. But that will be coming up in June. So we're super excited. It's going to be very difficult, but we know that the participants that we serve have way more difficult roads than this bike ride. So thank you guys all for coming out tonight. We really appreciate the time that you've taken to be on this call. Share with your community about Tutapona, who we are, what we do. And then if you're interested, feel free, please, if you're led to give, specifically maybe even to RAM, our Race Across America coming up. And then there's more information on the website. I really just appreciate you guys coming on, and we'll send out this recording if you want to share it with any of your friends. All right. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chandra, can you stop the recording? Because I couldn't find it.